You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense. We're the show where we try to help you as a business leader or owner do a little more, find ways that you can solve some problems and maybe do more to influence your team and get a little bit higher performance out of it. My guest today is Dr. David Pearce. He is a dentist by trade, but he has made a bit of a life change conversion. I'll let him explain more of that and kind of guide that shaping of our discussion. But David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Doug. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that journey that you've been on to, you had a successful dentistry practice and then you started thinking of some other things. Tell us more of that story. How has that journey unfolded?
Yeah, sure. Happy to try to keep it succinct. So general dentist, I've always been a lifelong learner. I figured out to actually enjoy the process of learning, not just the content, but the actual process of it. So applying that to dentistry, lots of opportunities in dentistry, many, many more now than perhaps when I started my career 3.5+ decades ago, to advance yourself in skill set. And so I initially felt like the key to success in dentistry is master your clinical abilities. And once you do that, the rest of it will take care of itself. That was an erroneous, calculated move, but nonetheless, it's one of the pieces of the puzzle. Is
it made logical sense at the time, right?
It made a lot of logical sense, right? Yeah, and it's hard to really judge. What is success? It's many levels, but if you judge financial lifestyle, if you look at financial lifestyle success, unless you know somebody really well and they're willing to trust you to be transparent, it's hard to know even the people you see fairly regularly. So like, are they really secure in their financial and what does their lifestyle truly look like? But the people I saw looked like, yeah, that's all you need to do. You're going to be good. Driving big cars, all kinds of stuff. Later found out like, no, not so successful that way. But, so I learned the skill set. And then, but probably the most intriguing to me on the way was, my gift, if I have a gift, is I just don't quit. Like I just keep going, just persevere. Not the sharpest tool in the shed, not the most, talented person, not creative as far as coming with ideas. I'm just a good student and I don't quit. And so in that journey, I got my skill set, got very, very good. But more importantly, is I was learning with dentists that were very, very good. And they were ahead of me on their journey. And what I found as we talked is the acceptance of, I'll say, patients saying yes. So, in the business word, we call that sales. Dentistry kind of avoids that word and calls it other things, but it's sales. So in the process of getting patients to say yes to relatively very large, investments in themselves, tens of thousands of dollars, like buying a really, really nice luxury car, but putting it in their mouth, that my success seemed to be much more so than people that I would say had been doing it a lot longer and were way more capable clinically than I was. And so that's the non-clinical business side of it. And it just is what it is. So I looked at that, and said, that's intriguing. I'm glad that I've become a student of that as well. And there's so many places you can learn, so many great books. You don't have to think it up, just, read it, get around those people, absorb it, put it into place, make it your own. So as I did that dentistry, I got to a point where clinically, the beauty of dentistry is our mantra was changing people's lives one smile at a time. And so it truly was life-changing dentistry. People, come in, they're covering their mouth with their hands. They can't go out and eat. There are all kinds of disabilities around their lifestyle, totally because of their mouth, not to mention the fear and embarrassment and that kind of stuff and judgment that they're feeling about that. So to be able to change that for somebody was just so fun. It's just like, they were just lots of tears and hugs and thank you. And you just saw it just change people's lives. And I knew that once I stopped doing dentistry, that would end, because that's it. And the good part about what I was doing was that was great. And the bad part about what I was doing was I had to be there, at the brick and mortar to make it happen. And when I wasn't there, I wasn't helping people per se, and the brick and mortar kept saying, feed me, feed me, feed me, which we call overhead. And so, I said, well, I like doing this part. I don't want to do clinical dentistry. I'd like to have more freedom in my life with my wife to, do other things, not have to be tied to the brick and mortar. And about 10 years ago, I got involved with a mastermind group of dentists, very, very accomplished and wanting to become more accomplished, similar to myself that way, although not many were way ahead of the curve than I was. And our conversations were always around the business side by structure. We could talk about anything, but it was always the business part that people were like, that's the struggle. That's the hard part. How do I do that? And typically those seem to be around, how do I get my team engaged? What does a leadership team look like compared to a bunch of employees that run around, or staff, whatever you want to call them? And then how do I get more sales? Like, how do I get patients to say yes, which all that boils down to more revenue. But the thing wasn't so much the revenue as much as it was those two frustrations. And they're pretty big frustrations. How do I get that better? And I found that I felt like I had answers to that. I wasn't the answer man, but I had good answers. And the group was always very supportive of, like, David, you're just good at this. Like, you're good at taking we see as difficult situations, asking the right questions, boiling down into actionable small steps that I can go back to the office on Monday and put into place. And so it's made sense to me. In my own office, I had some success. Apparently, I have some level of skill in helping other people in a coaching standpoint with this mastermind. So why not marry the two of them? And then I could have something that I could do beyond dentistry, where my mission of helping people, like one patient at a time, would be, my way, like maybe vicariously through these other dentists that I could help them to have greater success. I could kind of live through their success of helping those people. So that's kind of where it is. So a year and a half or so, about a year and a half ago was my last clinical day at the office. And since then I've, baked out a full coaching program, manuals and all that kind of stuff, and wrote a couple of books on the subject, and, vlogs and podcasts and social media stuff later. I'm reinventing myself, Doug. So, and it's fun. It's been a fun journey.
Well, a number of things strike me as you were describing that backstory, and thank you for sharing that. On one hand, the thing that really stuck out for me is the idea that yours is a plight that actually all entrepreneurs suffer in one form or another, regardless of how technical their idea might be for the business they create. But interestingly, when you think in terms of dentistry, you get your training and then you open a clinic, and you're the guy, because you're the professional, you're the licensed person that can perform the work. And I'm presupposing, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but you hired some hygienists and some other support people to work with you, but when it really got into the heavy change process, implants, veneers, replacements, bridges, etc., that was all you. And in an extreme way, that's exactly what all entrepreneurs fall into. Is they're the one. They've got the idea, they've got the inspiration, they've maybe got the expertise. They start trying to build a team around them, but they become that very narrow passage in the hourglass. Everything that flows through the business has to pass by or through them to make it a success. And the first symptom that emerges is the idea that the business caps out at some level. There's only so much one person can do with that workload. And, as many try to teach and coach, and I do myself for business owners, the goal is to help get the owner out of the business. The classic phrase that's used a lot is start working on the business, not in the business. And again, in your story, what struck me is when you think in terms of the technical training and licensing that's involved, that's a hard challenge to overcome. Sure. You can't just necessarily stand back and let everybody else do everything, because unless you can recruit and attract some other licensed dentists
Right.
into the practice, that heavy work can't be done.
That's right. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that too, it's interesting that you drew a picture of that. And Doug, like it's this very difficult thing, lots of training sort of to get to. And, to some degree that's true. And to the degree that it is true, there's a liability in dentistry, which is that you don't have to become really that anything more than mediocre on the business side. And chances are you'll keep your doors open. If you're in the restaurant business and you just do mediocre, it's like, goodbye, like you're gone. Like it's just the entry is so easy for somebody to jump into that particular type of a business, whereas dentistry, it's not, so it's my daughter's in dentistry. One of my two daughters in dentistry. She's a dentist. And as she was working her way through that journey, I kept saying to her, you're going into a very special, my word, special club. And you want it to be really hard to get into the club, because once you get into it, then it's good. But the liability of the club is, if you want it to be exceptional, then you got to do something that didn't teach you in school, and it may not be very, very natural for you to do. So, yeah, your point is spot on.
Well, and I think about that in a bit of a parallel universe. I think about the doctor that I go to for dermatology. And when I first met her and was referred to her, she was pretty much a one-person shop. Again, she had some technicians that worked with her, front office, front desk people that made appointments and did the billing and all that. But in time, she and her husband agreed that they wanted to turn that into a bigger, more robust business. And that did mean she had to recruit other doctors, other dermatologists to join the practice,
Right.
which she was successful in doing. And they've gone through 2 iterations of expanding and moving their facility to accommodate everything. And she's got quite I'm going to use probably a disparaging word, but she's got quite a factory going on now.
That's right, operation. Yep, right.
But it's a great operation, and it's hard as heck to get an appointment with her.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
because she, I think, only takes maybe a day or day and a half a week to actually see patients again,
sure.
or still, and yet, her name's all over it, and she certainly is available for consult and such.
Yeah.
But she's turned it into a real business that, again, does provide wonderful service. Even though I don't get to see her anymore, I certainly have grown to like the doc that I see, and I'm happy with it, and I'm not going to change.
It's great. Yeah.
And it's well beyond mediocre, I promise you.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's awesome. That's great. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's, but I think at the core of this is that challenge. So I want to lean a little more into your story on the developing the business side of it. You mentioned joining the mastermind, and all these gifted and talented docs were coming together, but yet what they really wanted to talk about was business, not so much the medical. But so tell us a little more about those discussions.
Yeah, they all sounded different, but yet, they all are pretty much, you could put them under just like 2 or 3 umbrellas, and that's it. It's either, it had to do like just the operations, the systems, the framework, so forth. Like, how do I get it so we're more organized in our day-to-day, that the logistics part. That was some of it, although those are definitely the easiest to handle. It's just a matter of finding a good system, like, oh, that makes sense. And then, it's just go about and change it, because it creates a little bit of a disrupt in the business, but it's not people changing so much who they are or how they act so much as just following a different path. So those are easily plentiful but easy conversations. On the flip side of that, of course, the hardest conversation was about leadership. Like, how do you make you a better version of you, because your business is never going to outgrow you unless you just extract yourself and put other people in charge that are way better at than you are, and you just take a way back seat to that. So that was always very, that was the fun part to me, because if you become a better version, if you become a better leader in the office, then you're going to be a better leader to the team that's there. You're going to be a better leader of patients to trust you and say yes to the treatment you're proposing. And it has to spill over into the rest of your life. You become a better spouse, a better husband, a better wife, a better child, a better patriot, a better citizen, Christian, wherever you want to go. You're just going to become a better form in all of those, because leadership plays its role everywhere. So those are always the ones, like, it was fun. Yeah, it's funny. I was just at one a few days ago, and a super accomplished young dentist was there, and so we were talking, and another guy and I, he was talking about, well, there's a thing he's had in his office. So just to back up a step, and like the one thing about medicine that's different than dentistry, I think, is that dentists can grow their business in two different ways, whereas I think physicians are limited to one, and that's all around fees. That by and large, the medical profession fees are set by insurance companies, because everybody, I don't want to say they expect, but there are concierge physicians who have broken away from that, but they're very few. And a number of those don't have the ability to do that. They don't have all the skills to do that on the non-business side, and then they end up going back into the fold, so to speak. But dentistry isn't like that. It's, there's a lot of dentists that are they're independent of insurance. I always was. My daughter just started her business. She's totally independent of insurance. So basically, that means to me, it means that, so like the great dermatologist you started with, she had to start discriminating against some of her clients, and not fair. But you were one of them. She said, I can't see Doug. Somebody else has to see Doug for whatever reason. I see some people, but I don't see Doug. So there's a discrimination that has to go on with growth when there's an owner leader there. So for us, the discrimination was probably more around price. It was like, the Ritz-Carlton has rooms filled every night, and Motel 6 has rooms filled every night. So there's a lot of differences in there, but one obvious one is price. And what suits one person doesn't suit somebody else, and we all value different things. And so I think that in those conversations of leadership, that's where the ones comes up. And so this one young man, he was talking about an insurance thing that he wanted to get out of his office, but he implied that his partner said no. And so we were talking, so when you go back home, because he said, we've looked at this a number of times and this is what happens, but he led us to believe that he was the decision maker of the two. So when you go back home, you actually talk to your partner and you say, this is what we should do. And he says, no, we shouldn't do that. That's the conversation you've had, almost specific, right? And so he said, no, not quite like that. It's like, well, so have you ever had that conversation with your partner? No, not really. Yet it sounds like you're blaming your partner for why this thing hasn't happened, but in reality, it's you. You're the one with the fear, whatever it is, of getting rid of it. And he kind of, he looked at us, and we know each other, the three of us that were talking. And so, there was some not so pleasant gestures at us with his hands. As you might imagine, like, Darn, you're absolutely right. Like, it's me. It's all about me. I've been the block of this whole thing all along, and I've been putting it on other people. But no, I'm the thing that has to grow and expand. And when I do, this is going to go away. So I just thought that's just such a fun, way. And of course, I have to look in the mirror all the time and say, well, how am I holding myself back? But so leadership is big, systems, leadership. And then it's just how do we spill that leadership into the team? Like, how do we take a team that, rather than them saying, tell me what to do, doc, that they go to a level of, ultimate level would be like, so I just want to fill you in on what I've been doing the last few months. And just so you know where we're at. And then there's, maybe 6 or 7 steps leading up to that, but at least get them to the point where, we would use a phrase like, I intend to. So I've identified a problem in my space. Here's the potential solutions to that. Of those, I've looked at them all carefully, and I've chosen this one. So I intend to do this. And then, so this is what I think, doc. And so to me, that's the very lowest level of leadership that I would accept in my office, because I don't know what's going on in your space. And I believe, and I appreciate, you're the quality controller, you got to make it happen, but I don't know. And I'll help you make the decision, but I'm not going to have you dump it on me, So I think those are probably those 3 categories are the ones that folks struggle with the most, and anything you can do to help, we're all on a journey, right? So you haven't arrived, I haven't arrived. We're just trying to get better. But those are the three that crop up all the time. Like you could always put every single thing under one of those, improve
One
the
of those
leader
three. Yeah.
or
Well,
assistant.
I think you summed it up well a moment ago. You used the phrase a business can never grow bigger than the leader may be. And I've spoken about that a lot on this show because I reflect on my days as a banker and working with business owners of all shapes and sizes, all kinds of industry. And there was always a pattern. If the business had taken off, it was a startup and they made it through that, and then it got up to a little bit of a scale up kind of mode and got some great market response and traction and started attracting good sales. Then there was an opportunity to maybe from there propel itself to 2x or 3x what it already was, because there was a mass that was proven and it was valued by the market. But inevitably a lot of those businesses would stall out and they would sadly a few of them would crater at that point because the owner founder never made the shift. Right. Never sought the learning as you described, never admitted they could be the bottleneck, never admitted they could be the limiting factor. For those that were willing to look in the mirror and say, man, this is a great deal. We could go gangbusters, but I'm the obvious roadblock here. What do I need to do differently? And in some cases, and I'll say this in a non-medical sense, the answer was go hire a CEO, go find somebody that can truly run this business day to day. You can sit back as the owner and still own a majority share, lion's share, and set a vision and set a big picture strategic direction, but you don't have to have your hands in the day to day.
Right. Yeah. And I imagine, at least for me, some of that everything gets tied into ego.
Right.
You can't say, well, if I'm, how does anybody go from being like you are originally it was just you and an idea. I'm going to have this business on my own, if that's what it was, which oftentimes it can be. And then it goes from that to like, I'm the one that created all of this. And then now I'm going to put somebody else in charge where it's going to be like the CEO is going to be like maybe even the face of the business in many ways, not just the idea and the guy that executes all the stuff, but almost the face of it. And then like, whatever happened to the original visionary guy? Is he still around or she still around? And very much is, and very much a part of it, but not in that limelight, so to speak. And it can be a big struggle, because it's a shift. It's a huge shift. And I love what you said earlier when we started the show, like these plateaus, like there's no question, every single one of those plateaus, like, as good as you are, that's as good as you're going to get. And to get to the next level, you got to change things because, you're not going to get there by doing what you did to get here.
Mm-hmm. So. There are articles that are being written now. We're in an interesting time in our business history. There is a huge amount of wealth that has been created and built up by the boomer generation. And those are all folks like you and I that many are ready to cash out and, go hit the golf course or the fishing boat or whatever it is they choose to do with their retirement years. So there's this amazing opportunity for younger people to step in and buy those businesses as opposed to fight the startup headaches and go through the ground up bootstrap kind of phase. And that's creating a giant potential transfer of wealth. And whoever you talk to, the numbers are all over the board. The most consistent one I see is some valuation at about $6 to $7 trillion of wealth in that transitional period. Yeah. Are there those kind of transitions in the dental world?
Yeah, sure. Some of it, it's not uncommon. I spoke earlier about like my daughter. It's not uncommon, for kids to follow their parents in whatever direction. We certainly never gave any, my wife and I never like any, like you should go into dentistry type thing. Like I know some children felt that. I never felt that from my parents. So I came from a long line of civil engineers, but never felt that feeling. I mean, I think there was an assumption that I might go into that because I was good at math and enjoyed a lot of that stuff, but never felt that pressure. So there are quite a bit of. So that's a great transition. Just stays even in the same family. This from generation to generation. There is a trend, though. It's interesting, Doug, in dentistry, which wasn't there when I was looking at businesses, where corporations are, purchasing private practices and then, kind of bundling those together into an entity and then either making it bigger or then just selling that to another one. So there's business opportunities for non-dentist entrepreneurs to gobble up dental offices. And I think, I don't want to go a long story on this, but when I talked to the dentists who were the generation before me, the hours that they spent away from their family doing, I'll say, professional related stuff that might have been, at the restaurant with a bunch of buddies, having dinner together multiple nights a week and having a cocktail or something like that. But it wasn't at home with the kids at the sports things like that. To my generation, where there's much more of that. And the current generation, no right or wrong, but they seem to be much less inclined to want to do the work of business ownership. As opposed to, I can make an okay income, just give me a W-2 and a job, and I just punch in and I punch out. So I don't want to take over that. So corporate has moved in and said, well, this is a good play for them because then they can buy a business, type of business that's can be profitable, can be very productive as far as generating revenue. And I can have a fairly ready source of these highly trained technicians, we call dentists, who don't want to own businesses. They're not necessarily going to leave me in 3-4 years and go set up across the street or wherever that might be, that they're happy to stay on for many, many years in that capacity. So that's been a shift to that the number of I think we see the number of privately held dentists as a percentage, of the total population, 5 years from now versus what it was 35 years ago could be vastly different because of that shift.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, and it's alive and well. There's no question that and I can't imagine it going away. And on the other hand of that, I think it's very difficult. If I looked at my practice, which became very specialized, very very niche as far as the services we were offering at a clinical level, that made it my office was for sale for 3 years before we were able to find somebody that had the maybe it wasn't even the money, because at that point in time it had been the fire sale was continuing on, because my wife and I wanted to move on. It's like, hey, we were expecting to be out of here a few years ago and be on to doing other things, and so it was just finding somebody that had that skill set and wanted to jump into someplace that had already been created that way. Just those numbers were getting less and less the more and more specialized we got. So corporate doesn't follow that model at all, so it's meant to be, the bread and butter type stuff is what they do, so that, if somebody says, oh, I want to have a child, I want to move to here, my spouse is going there, I'm going to move with them, that they could fairly readily find somebody to fill that highly specialized trained dentist position, but not so highly trained that they're looking for something else. So on the other hand, it does open up a very large opportunity going forward for somebody who wants to do the kind of dentistry that I did, because I don't ever feel like there's competition, but the demand for that service is just increasing. The baby boomers, aren't ready to get buried yet. They got a lot of money, and they've had years of maybe neglecting themselves, so they're happy to put the money into themselves. So there's a huge opportunity for that, and going beyond the baby boomers, there'll be a huge opportunity because the number of folks willing to do it just is getting less.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about an orthodontist friend that I know who several years ago sold his very successful practice in a very affluent part of the Houston area, and he had a little bit of a stay put obligation through the acquisition, and his time was going to wane down over maybe 18 months or something like that. And to help make the transition, and that all happened. And what he's done, it sounds somewhat similar to you. He went out and he was a lifelong learner. I mean, he is always taking these really strange courses and,
Yeah.
Greco-Roman literature and,
Okay.
things
Yeah.
like that.
Good for
And,
you.
but what he's done, he's gone out and got himself certified as a coach. And now he helps aspiring and up and coming orthodontists who are
Great.
trying to build practices. He is coaching in that space.
Yeah. Awesome.
And leading some masterminds and doing some things like that to help perpetuate. So he kind of stays connected with the medical part of what he knows, but he has focused a lot on the leadership, the business development, the business organizational growth, and development. So
there's a real shortage of that for sure. That's great.
Well, as he always said, they didn't teach me this in dental school. we didn't talk about this stuff in dental school.
And as an orthodontist, he could get by without it. I mean, he was just somewhere probably in some sense like I was, which is like, is this all there is to it? Like, I mean, isn't there more here someplace? And I'm willing to do the work, whatever that looks like, to just make it more significant, make it better. And so, good for him. That's awesome. Yeah. That's nice.
Well, there's one more angle of this I'd like to get your take on, David, if you don't mind sharing. As you've alluded a couple times to this whole idea of this life change decision that you and your wife made. Talk to us a little more about the evolution of that thinking and, your choices. And what I'm thinking of, there's a framework that I often talk about. A guy named Bob Buford wrote a book called Halftime, and he talks about people at some point in life, they realize I've been chasing success and now that's not enough. Maybe you can't maybe say I've totally arrived, but I've achieved something and I realize that's not enough. I want to do something different. I want to do more, basically. And Buford calls it the shift from success to significance. And it's an interesting pivot. But I see this a lot in the senior executives that I work with, and I often challenge them, even if they're going to stay in their corporate jobs a few more years to get to retirement, to make the pivot and say, well, what kind of legacy do you want to leave here at this company? You don't own the company. You're a senior executive in it. Have you thought about your legacy, and have you begun that process of trying to shape and frame what that may look like? And it's actually usually a tearful moment every time we get to that point in the discussion, because in a lot of cases they haven't necessarily thought in those terms, and they realize there's some huge opportunities they've left on the table.
Sure. Yeah. Or just didn't pursue. Yeah. I don't know. I think for a lot of years in my journey, probably had some really good. I'd never really had a coach. I went to a lot of great courses, but to say like I had a mentor that had my back all the way through, or some of the time, I never found that person. And probably because I didn't look hard enough or didn't look at all. That's I wouldn't blame it on the universe. It's more on me. So, but at some point I looked at and said, that. I'm not sure, maybe 15, 20 years ago, I was looking at saying, that if I was going to write my epitaph, it'd be something like, if I'm reading David's epitaph, it'd be, I'm a better version of myself because I spent time with David. And so that became something where I looked at and said, like, so I knew early at some point that my personality is not going to be out there, like changing hundreds of thousands of lives. Like, that's not me. I'm a below the radar person, always have been, and I operate much better there. But that said, so I remember a phrase again in around that time of, do unto one that which you wish you could do for the world, and that kind of became my guiding light quite a long time ago. So I got involved, for instance, mentoring through a young man, no dad, through a Big Brothers Big Sisters organization, well over a decade ago. So, one person, one life, but I looked at and said, that the chances of this person graduating high school is 1 in 10 in his high school. The chances of him going to jail is 9 in 10. and drugs and all this other stuff. It just all adds up. Like there's the odds are way stacked against this young man of having anything other than just another statistical tragedy in my eyes. Not fair to say that. So anyway, so I think I was putting that in, like I was in my office, that I wanted to look at that and say, I want each one of you, how would you say, forced learning. So for a new hire, this is who we are. And you will become a better version of yourself, whether you'll like it or not. So if you're on that mission, that sounds at all interesting to you, you might be in the right place. If you're not, like you don't like to read, like regular reading, if you don't like to talk about that stuff, if you don't like to put things into place and put learning into place and prove you put into place and be accountable to that, this is definitely the wrong place for you, because you'll feel a lot of pressure to do that and you'll just want out. So that was the culture in the office, and that's been there for a long while based on kind of what I wanted to do. And so really, and so my feeling was when anybody leaves this office, whatever that looks like when you leave, to go do something else with your life, that my victory would be like, I'm a better person because I worked in that office. Just that. I don't care if you say you're a better hygienist, dentist, which I don't care about that part. Like, I'm just a better person. Better relationship with my spouse, better relationship with my kids. Like, I'm just a better person. And I got, some very, very nice cards from people that retired or, things that are going on to say, like, so if I have to say something like that, because you were tough, you were hard, you were all this kind of stuff, but, I would never have the relationship with my father that I have now, or with my sister or my child or whatever I have now, not because of you, just because you created this culture that, because I accepted the culture, I had no choice but to push my way past some of the barriers that I had in my own self. So
that's amazing.
So I was really fortunate to be able to latch onto that, at a younger part in my career. So the transition out of clinical, like I had a very good friend who executive coached to people and organizations and communities. And so he's super accomplished. He's amazing how he can facilitate that identification of ideas and values and make those big groups change like that. But he said, like, you could easily be, he and I know each other pretty well. He said, you could easily, like your CEO types, feel a sense of loss and mourning for what you had there, because you're the doctor and doctor this and doctor that. And then when you walk away, like, that's gone. And in my head, I kind of looked at it and said, I understand that totally. I just know I'm not going to feel that way, because a really significant part of what I was doing through coaching and just other stuff is going to continue on, which is I'm going to intentionally try to help, be present to help people become better versions of themselves in the ways that they want to or need to get where they want to get. I was fortunate. I was just really very, very fortunate to be able to have somebody explain that to me in a way that I understood it, and I embraced it and started moving in that direction. And it just kind of keeps on going that way. So
that's awesome.
I'm very fortunate.
Great story. Well, congratulations and kudos for establishing that and working through that. And I know I'm working with a national private equity group now that is, they're working in the home services space. They're helping businesses that are, we're talking plumbers, electricians, HVAC, those kinds of businesses. Yeah. But they're helping facilitate those transitions that I was talking about, the kind of the boomer generation handing off. And one of the big things, the value add that these guys do way beyond what the average business broker does, is there is a training and coaching program to help the acquiring entrepreneurs shape and mold a culture just the way you're describing it.
Yeah.
And start from day one on the announcement of the sale. Hey, this business is being sold, old Mr. So-and-so's walking out the door, and I'm your new guy. I'm the new owner, and welcome to my team. And just from day one, start shaping and molding and in their trajectory of doing this, and they've done probably $100 million worth of these trades up to this point, but there are no doubt some personnel turnovers. You mentioned giving the people a challenge, saying, hey, we're going to start doing these things as a team and as a group and as a culture. Yeah. And if that's not you and you're not comfortable doing that, you're, probably not going to be a fit here for long. Right. And that's a tough pill, because in some cases, those people you're talking to are children of the former owner or extended relatives that have stayed in the business,
right?
Even though the owner has sold out. And now all of a sudden,
Thanksgiving gets tougher.
It gets a whole lot tougher, right? So anyway, Well, David, our time's about up. This has been amazing, and thank you for sharing all of this. Tell folks the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in talking and learning a little more about your work.
Yeah, sure. Well, the name of my company is Ultimate Success in Dentistry. The website is ultimatesuccess.dentist. So sometimes there's no comma in there. We also have another website called 4M40. You can spell it or write it any way you want to, .com, which sometimes that's easier for folks to remember. So 4M40.com or ultimatesuccess.dentist. And I'm very easy to find on those. I have a LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube channels as well. But if anybody went to the website, it just immediately points me in directions. I am really very transparent. I've done what I've done. I haven't done any more. I haven't done any less, and I'm happy to share it all. So I'm easy to find that way. So yeah, if somebody's looking for it, and the first book that I wrote, it'll be published next month, so there'll be access to that as well. So
that's great.
Well, yeah, it's great.
Well, again, thank you for sitting in and sharing with us. And as always, folks, those links will be in the show notes. So just hop down and check out the information there. And if you're listening on your favorite streaming service, there are show notes as well. But I know you might be walking or driving or something. So hop over to our YouTube channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. You can get the video version of this. You can get to see David's smiling face. And great dental work, by the way.
Yeah, and that's good, right? Yeah.
And enjoy the episode that way. For now, I'm going to sign off, say goodbye, and ask you to go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.